about to start receiving services from CARD for our autistic child who is 3 years of age. My question is, if I am currently a stay-at-home mom, would it be better for our son to receive services in the home or center-based services? We have purchased a camera system to be placed in our child's room in order to learn as much as possible from the therapy sessions so we're able to transfer skills. Shannon, if you don't mind me asking, what did you do, and did your therapy in the home majority of time for your child? I know you stated your child made a lot of gains during his first year of therapy with CARD. Absolutely true. Your son's story gives us hope. As always, we thank you for all of your guidance. And they said that, you said that you and your son are such an inspiration. And, I just want to say that when we started on this journey, I was so overwhelmed, and I had some anger issues. And one of the things that my husband and I said was, let's do everything that we can for our son, and then let's make it count for something. Let's tell our story as much as we can to whoever we can, and make it count for something.
That's amazing.
So thank you for saying that it's helping you, because that, we wanted it to.
You have such an incredible effect on people. It's so amazing, and you have such a voice. It's very, very helpful to people, absolutely. And everyone at CARD also really appreciates you and loves you, because the therapists learn so much from you as well.
Well, they inspire me. I mean, look, you guys gave me my kid back.
Well, thank you for saying that.
I will work the rest of my life, and I will not even get through, half the thank yous that I need to get through. You know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you. But we feel the same way about you.
Well, thanks.
So.
Love fest. Okay, so but let's talk about, because I didn't have the option of center-based.
Right. And
let's be clear about that.
Yes, absolutely. And for many years, we just did home-based and school-based. And then we just started center-based a couple of years ago. And I think the main reason we actually initially started center-based was the success we saw in our school. We have a school in Virginia, and that is a kind of a different setting. It's all center-based, obviously. The kids are dropped off, and they're there all day long, right? And so there's benefits to both, and we can discuss those. So the benefits to being at home is, you will learn some things in the home setting that you can't really learn in the center. For instance, how to appropriately pay attention to mom calling you when you're watching TV, or how to respond to mom saying, "Go wash your hands, it's dinner time," whatever. So home activities, right? And then you also will learn certain, and yes, it gives mom and dad more of an opportunity, I suppose, to observe. And we always want you observing as much as possible and learning from it. But let's be very clear, most of your learning will not be by observing a therapist. You'll learn some stuff, but what we really want you to do as a parent is a little different than what we expect our therapists to do. Our therapists administer new training. They're giving your child new content, and so they're using techniques that are much more rigid, perhaps, and much more rule governed. So it's sort of a discrete trial format, or it's a NET form. It's an exact format that they have to follow. Whereas with you as parents, what we really count on is you helping to generalize. So what that means is that if I teach your child, 5 different concepts about 5 different things about blue, the color blue, I don't know, everything from this is blue to the sky is blue, to mom wore a blue dress today, to blue's my favorite color, to whatever it is. We want you to be responsible for generalizing that to real life. That means every opportunity, that particular week that we're working on, let's say colors or blue or whatever it is, we want you to be familiar enough with the things that your child's learning so that when you're in the normal environment and driving around, you'll say, hey, what color is that? Or, point out things that are blue. Make the child apply their knowledge to their daily life. That's something that takes a lot of time, and if therapists were doing that all the time, it would slow things down. That's how we ask our parents to participate. And in terms of behaviors, for instance, if a child tantrums because they want to Every time they want something, they'll scream and cry. So we will start the process off and teach the child that screaming and crying is not acceptable, and instead they have to either point to a picture or give you a word or ask for something. Then we ask you to make sure to do the same thing. So it's kind of like you have to be consistent with us, and you have to go a little bit step beyond and be a little bit more generalized in what you do. So there's some benefit to observing the therapy, but it's not where your training is coming from. Your training is a little bit separate. You should be getting training from us separately as well, which is through our family education services. Now, having said that, the center-based benefits are we have access to other kids. Sometimes it's really important to have access to other kids. We never really will place your child with a child who's more having severe behaviors. Our kids are pretty well behaved to begin with, and if not, there's always a therapist who's with them who will control the behavior. The purpose is to find kids who there's always going to be some child who's progressing earlier or a little bit older, has started the program earlier, and they will model language. Language is learned from other kids much faster than it is from adults. So we sort of want to have that opportunity. There's a lot of social and play activities that we can't do without other kids. We need other kids in order to do that. So that is allowed, and that happens in center-based. And also, so all our social skills programs, obviously. And also, you always have several BCBAs on site who will rotate and observe and be able to give feedback. So my feeling is that generally speaking, the stronger therapists end up being the ones that are in the centers because they get continual guidance. So you're going to have a little bit, I think, of a more realistically, the therapists that come, they're all people, right? And they're young people. So they come to your house and they have a 4-hour session. I guarantee you some of that, the therapist is going to be a little tired. If they're at the center, they're not going to be tired. They're not allowed to be tired. Someone's watching them 24/7. That's the difference. There's someone watching the staff all the time. We have cameras in every corner of our rooms. We have cameras. I, from my desk, can zoom into one of the cameras in, let's say, Texas, and I can actually zoom in to the point where I can read the logbook that's on the table. So these cameras are amazing, and it allows us to just monitor things a little bit better than at your home. So, my recommendation is, and I have to tell you, these are some secondary benefits, I think. One is that now that we do more center-based, we have lower turnover because our staff is not tired of driving all the time. They can see more kids and they're happier. So because they're like school teachers, they will come to the center and they will be working with kids and get regular breaks and so on. Our staff gets really exhausted when they're traveling all the time from home to home and school and so on. So, in that sense, you get like more kind of refreshed and alive staff. My recommendation generally is to try center-based and have maybe one session at home or maybe a couple of sessions at home and the majority of your stuff at center-based. Your child's 3, by the time they're 5, they'll probably also start school, and then we'll have some school-based as well. So it'll be sort of a combination. That's a long way of answering that.
Well, and this is something that I thought about a lot too, because I think about how different would our lives be now had we had the option of center-based. Because I will tell you that having the I always say that I learned a lot from watching the video and from the video monitor and listening to the video monitor day in and day out. But I got to be honest with you that I learned a lot, but I learned in 4 years of listening to the video monitor, I learned probably 4 times that the first time I did one of the e-learnings.
Oh, that's a good point.
And I was much more effective when I did the e-learning. So know that I think it's faster doing it the other way. And also, I know that you said you're a stay-at-home mom, and I think it's wonderful that you have the opportunity to do that, and I'm wondering if there are other kids. We only had Jem, but I was trying to work from home, and I changed my career to work from home so that I could be there so that we could have the therapy, and it was tough. with a capital T. Figuring out how to get laundry done, how to get the dishes clean, how to get just the paperwork that comes with autism. Forget the paperwork of life, but the paperwork that comes with autism, being able to have the time and the hours to take care of all of those things and have some self-care moment for myself. I didn't have it. And I had a nervous breakdown in the middle, like year 2 of therapy, because I wasn't able to take care of myself in the middle of all that. And financially it was devastating for us. I think about if we had had the center base, maybe all of that wouldn't have happened. My only cautionary statement to parents is if you're doing the center base, you take part of that time when your child is away to make sure that you are educated to follow through on it. It's not a drop off and you're relieved of responsibility.
Yeah, and I think, and that's a good way to put it. Thank you, Shannon. That's a very big factor, actually. And I would say, imagine if your child has 30 hours at the center, right? So that's 6 hours a day. That's a lot of hours. Please feel free. I mean, and there, we will provide you with parent training to the level that we think is appropriate anyway on an ongoing basis. But please do actually take some of that time. I mean, Shannon and I are saying the same thing. We're just saying both sides of it.
Yeah.
Take some of that time to observe, but please also take some of that time to take care of yourself.
Yep. Like
that is one of our intentions, honestly. I have 3 kids of my own, and I often feel like I don't even have half an hour in a day. It's like I'm like, oh gosh, I gotta fix my hair today. It's not gonna happen. I just don't have time. So we do want you have to be there for the long haul. You just have to be able to keep going. So any kind of support we can provide you is just as important to the well-being of your child. Please do consider that as well for all of our families. We really feel that center-based has a lot of benefits.
Yeah.
And I know it's hard for some parents in terms of just driving to the center, but come on, realistically, we drive to so many different things for our kids. And by the way, another thing you should know is that we're starting a lot of recreational programs. I don't know which card office you're going to be at, but across the board, we will be starting art classes, dance, yoga, cooking, all these things for our kids. And our goal is that while they're doing, these will be weekend activities mostly to begin with, because some of our kids' families have really requested. Physical fitness actually is the number 1 request from our families, which we will be doing. And when we do that, we are trying to now start developing activities and or leisure time areas for our parents. Like, I really would like to be able to provide our parents with a lot of different resources for them to have an hour or 2 where they can relax while we're doing something fun with their kids.
What you talking about, Willis?
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying.
what you talking about? That sounds like a heaven.
I know.
That's like talking crazy to me. I could just drool.
I know.
That's exciting. That's why you are a visionary in this field, because you recognize what we all need.
Well, thanks. I can't even imagine. Sometimes I look at my own kids, and they're older now, and I think like, oh my God, it's so exhausting.
Yeah, it is. They're exhausting, but we love them.
We love them.
Okay, let's talk about, hi, Shannon and Dr. Doreen. Lately, my 4-year-old son has been having tantrums and whining when he is asked to do something. It's out of control. He was doing so well, but now we're dealing with this. He's full-time at CARD, and these episodes happen when any of the therapists are placing demands, very simple demands, or going to the bathroom. I have never seen these tantrums prior to this. I thought he was supposed to get better, but yet he seemed much more intolerant to anything. His sleep patterns are great. His diet is great. I'm doing everything, but this happens. Please help. You know what I love about this question? I think so often as parents, we think, oh, we work so hard to get the therapy to start. The therapy starts, we see improvement, and we go, oh, yeah, everything is fine. I can relax now. I'm never going to go through anything with my child ever again. And if our kid was neurotypical, that wouldn't be the case either. Teenage years are a perfect example. Just when you think you have it figured out, they grow and something else new happens. But as autism parents, it feels like regression.
Right.
When it isn't.
Right.
So help us. Right. Help us save us.
There's a lot of stuff to think about. My first urge is to say, I want to see your child, because someone needs to figure out what's exactly going on. I don't know a lot of things. For instance, how long has your child been in therapy? Did these behaviors exist before? Did they go down and now up, or were they non-existent and now they're going up? The pattern of behavior change is very important, because we're always looking at what happened right before this behavior change occurred, and what's occurring to maintain it. Usually what I find maintains behavior change is attention. So for instance, if he's having whining and all this sort of stuff, somewhere in one of his environments, he's gaining a consequence that is maintaining it. So my first question would be, why is he whining? It's whining and screaming, or whining and tantruming.
When asked to do something.
So it's demand-based. So essentially he's trying to avoid or escape. Who in his environment, or which environment allows him to avoid or escape? I know it's not going to be the therapist. Is it at school? Has he seen someone else avoid or escape by tantruming? I don't know, but something has initiated this, and there's an inconsistency in his program. Your supervisor needs to be looking at this issue. Have you discussed it with your supervisor? If you have and things are not progressing, your next move is to, if you are in an office where you have a clinical manager, some of our locations have clinical managers, you will go to that person next. If you're not, you will call the clinical director, and or email her. Her name is Evelyn Kong, and she will arrange to A, speak with you, B, speak with your supervisor, C, do an actual clinic with you. She can always Skype in to your clinic if you're far from here, or she will see you in person. She also travels to every single site and has that contact. So please do get in touch with Evelyn Kung. She's at headquarters, so you can always call here. And our number here is 818-345-2345, and she's on the directory. Or you can email her at e.kung@centerforautism.com, and she will get to you. And be persistent with that, because it's very important that this be fixed. Now, I also want to say behavior change isn't from one day to another. It takes some effort. If there's been a leak, like if your child has figured out, I should keep tantruming and whining because it's effective somewhere, it'll keep happening for a while until we find the leak and actually stop the person who's allowing it. And so be patient with it, because it'll take a little while to fix this. But also don't be alarmed by it. By the way, a lot of times, as Shannon says, what happens is that demands were not being placed enough before. Our program places a lot of demands on the kids because we're trying to push them. We push them as hard as we can to move forward. Obviously, they have to learn a lot. So it's also very possible that he's just started the program, or his demand level, we are placing a lot of demands on him. Again, it's the job of the supervisor to balance things out so that there's always a certain level of push, but then there's also a lot of reinforcers. So that's another thing you want to be looking at, is does he have enough valuable reinforcers? Sometimes our kids get access to their favorite reinforcers all day long, and then the value of the reinforcer isn't that much anymore, so they're not willing to do something to earn it. If he has reinforcers that he really loves, pull them from his daily life and only allow him to access them during therapy so that they're valuable, and so he's willing to comply with the demands. There's no other way we can do this. We can't slow down. We have to keep pushing our kids, and so we have to place demands. We have to prompt them, model, help them, make sure everybody's consistent, and then reinforce heavily. But we can't slow down. So that's the feedback I can give, and we'll get it all fixed.
Yeah, it will get fixed. And one of the things that I want to add that somebody said to me along the way that made me feel better about when these kinds of things happen is that it's a sign of intelligence. When your child is pushing back, it's a sign of intelligence, and you just got to figure it out. And that made me feel better. I was like, oh, he's intelligent, and so he's growing.
He has a mind of his own, and he doesn't. The kids that really concern me are the ones that are very indifferent.
Yeah.
and don't really respond very much to external factors. He's trying to manipulate his environment. It's perfect. It's great. You know, your supervisor should be programming in so that he replaces the whining with a request for a break or a request for something easier, that sort of thing. They know what to do, the supervisors, and if they don't, you need to get to the CLM or the clinical manager or the clinical director so that we can oversee it.
Okay, great. But I want to take one from Facebook right now. Somebody wrote in and said, my 6-year-old recently started hand flapping. He has never hand flapped before unless he has sneaked food in that he's not supposed to eat. So we looked over the diet and it wasn't that. Then I realized his best friend hand flaps. So he probably picked it up from there and realized he likes it. What can I do about that? What types of replacements can I suggest to him that would give him the same but socially acceptable self-stim input?
It's funny because one of our favorite kids that we talk about a lot used to hand flap and now is a drummer. He's an amazing drummer.
Yes.
So, you know, I hesitate to answer this. I can give you some ideas. There are, of course, other activities. You can either block it completely, which means he has to keep his hands in his pockets, and potentially he could have like a rock or something in his pocket that he could play with or manipulate. I was telling Shannon one time, in the Middle East, a lot of men have beads, you know, rosary beads that they play with, which is a way to keep your hands occupied. You know, obviously any activity, anything like these stress balls or those types of things that will, it'll reinforce an incompatible behavior. Essentially, it's anything that's incompatible with the hand flapping. Otherwise, you know, my tendency with that sort of thing, given that it's an imitation, is that I would just block it and replace it with something completely incompatible rather than give him something. I don't think he needs to hand flap. I think he's just seen someone else doing it and is imitating it. So, you know, the best way for me is always when he's sitting, ask him to put his hands underneath him if he's hand flapping. When he's walking or standing, most boys have their hands in their pockets anyway. Put something sensory in his pockets that he likes to play with, whether it's smooth or it's squishy or whatever it is. The rest of the time he could always have a, you know, stress ball. Can you think of other things that he can use? But I would try to get rid of it because, you know, and actually, you know what? The number one thing that replaces any kind of inappropriate hand activity is texting, you know, and getting on a phone, which is the very typical behavior of boys these days.
And I was just thinking about that because Jem used to hand flap, and he doesn't hand flap at all anymore. And one of the intermediary things we did before the phone, I don't know if they're still as popular, but there were the little finger boards. They're little skateboards that are just the size of like the length of a finger, and all the boys used to play with them on their desks and do things to make them flip, and then they'd put them in their pocket as soon as school would start.
Right.
And that was the thing before the cell phone. And as soon as he had a fingerboard, he didn't care about flapping anymore.
Right.
He just wasn't as concerned.
There's a lot of little toys like that that boys can keep themselves occupied with. What's very interesting is that I'm beginning to see, nobody really understands what the reinforcing component is for some of the self-stimulatory behaviors like hand flapping, and I'm beginning to see that the function that maintains hand flapping in some cases and also spitting, strangely enough, is visual. You'd never think that, but there's a visual satisfaction. There's a satisfaction involved with what they see when they do this. So you should pay attention to whether the hand flapping is in the sight or it's down here, or it only occurs during moments of excitement. I tend to treat it differently in all of those cases.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. That wouldn't have occurred to me.
Spitting, that's the one that I was shocked with. A lot of our kids who spit, we've noticed they like the way it looks.
Yeah. Well, we have a friend who loves to splash, and when asked about it, he says all the sparkly colors that happen when doing that. And I've talked to Temple Grannon about the fact that she said you could have put her on a beach and she could have let sand, and still, she says to this day that it's one of her favorite things to do, to put sand in her hand and let it
sift.
You know, and the sparkles as it goes down, and the rates at which you can have it go through, and how it sparkles different is just ultimately so fascinating. Yeah. It's like, you know, the best thing in the world to do.
That's amazing. Sometimes I wonder if our kids, you know how we all in sort of the journey of life, try to become more aware, and we try to slow ourselves down so that we can be more aware. Sometimes I wonder if our kids are actually so aware of what's going on in their environment that they're distracted by it, and they get stuck on it. It's like you're saying, they see beauty that we don't see because they have a different visual perception than we do.
And it seems like in some cases, like when Temple talks about it, it seems meditative.
Yeah, absolutely.
And why wouldn't
or
we
just
want that?
Or just incredibly beautiful. I mean, if I was to see the sparkle in the water, which I rarely do, but when we do, we get all excited about it. It's like if you're in the beach, in the ocean, and you see the sun glimmering on the ocean, obviously we're like, oh my God, that's so beautiful.
Right.
Now, if you were to see that in everyday life, if you were to see that when you take a bath, I'd be doing the same thing.
Right.
I mean, I'd be pausing and saying, oh my God, this is unbelievable.
And you would take longer to do it. It's true.
Yeah.
And interesting take on things. Yeah. Okay, a good friend of the show writes, hello, last week Dr. Doreen talked about the logbook for iPad for data entry. I downloaded the app and I'm able to log in with my skills account, but it seems I need an appointment or set up an appointment to enter into the logbook lessons. And they put a question mark. Is this app only for card providers, or can a parent also use it? And they said, thank you. And she goes on to say, please do not give up on Florida. She says, we have so many families praying for you to be here and we love you.
Thank you so much, and hi, and hope you're doing well. And no, we're not giving up on Florida. In fact, we're trying to get help on our application and some other issues that are going on there. We're not giving up, but we're working on it. It's active in my email inbox right now. Could you, I don't know why you require an application or an app or something like that, appointment or something like that. But what I would do is I would email the skills team, and Eliana can probably figure out what the issue is, and I'll try to remember to follow up with her, because it's available to the public. It's not just for card families.
And you can CC me on that request to skills and say in your reference that you talked about it on skills, and CC me on it, and I can help to babysit it too. They're really good about taking care of things, but just CC me on it, and I'll check into it too, because if you're having that problem, then somebody else is having that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for letting us know.
We had someone ask on the live feature, my 3-year-old autistic child is a hair puller. It's hard to figure out the correct behavior approach because we've noticed he does it for multiple reasons. He may do it because he's angry, because you told him no. He may do it for sensory reasons. And he also does it because he thinks it's a game. When I attempt to avoid him and walk away, he will follow me around the room and feels it's a game. Help, I don't know what to do.
Okay, so it's very unlikely that he's doing it for sensory reasons if he's also doing it to avoid a demand or to try to get your attention. So it's more likely he's done it, and it has been successful in 2 ways. One is the person whose hair has been pulled, has probably looked and said, oh no, I can't believe you did that, and that he's gotten a lot of reaction. And that's the attention that's interesting to him. It's like the person freaking out. And secondly, he's realized that it's a good way to, if someone has said, hey, you need to do this now, and he's pulled their hair, they've kind of let him out of it or let him skip it. So I would guess that the primary function would be avoidance of a demand. And I would think the secondary function is attention seeking. So what I would do is I would just deal with making sure that he does not get out of a demand if he pulls hair. You will also at the same time block your reaction. Just avoid giving a reaction to it. Primarily, any of the behaviors that are painful, like for instance, pulling your hair will cause you pain. Hitting you or smacking or whatever, pinching, these are things that cause the individual, the parent or the therapist to have pain. I would block the behavior. I wouldn't even allow it to occur, but then I would resume and continue. So in other words, here's 2 scenarios that'll help you. I'm just sitting there and your child pulls my hair. I will try to block it, do something else, or actually get up and leave in order to avoid giving attention. If I've now asked your child to do something like give me the cup, and your child pulls my hair, then I will just ignore that. First, I'll try to block it. If I can't block it, then I'll ignore it, and I will physically maneuver your child to give me the cup, and then I'll reward your child for giving me the cup. So more than anything else, the most effective thing with these types of things is blocking and extinction. So you want to kind of avoid the behavior, and you want to ignore it happening, and then you want to move on and do something that is appropriate so you can reward it.
Okay.
But this is one of those situations where it's a multi-function behavior. You really need it. The best thing to do would be to get someone to help you identify the function very clearly, maybe multiple functions in different scenarios. By the way, if you don't have a BCBA or someone in your environment who can help you with that, the Skills does have what's called a CFA, the Indirect Functional Assessment, CARD's Indirect Functional Assessment, which does help you identify the function. It'll ask you a bunch of questions about this hair pulling behavior. And then once you identify the function, it connects to the BIP builder, Behavior Intervention Plan builder, and that will tell you how to actually intervene and what you should do exactly.
And you can find all of that at skillsbipbuilder.com. It is also a part of Skills, which you can go to Skills for Autism, but if you just want to do the BIP Builder, you can do that on its own. Okay, so many questions here. Hello, my 5-year-old daughter has PDD-NOS. She has a fear of water. Bathing, walking on wet pavement. She wants me to carry her. I can't even touch her if my hand is wet, or I just put hand sanitizer on because she thinks they're still wet. It's driving me crazy. I know she washes her hands fine at school. What can I do?
If she washes her hands fine at school and her reaction to water is only around you, then it's not a fear of water. It's the reaction she's getting from you. So in other words, first of all, let's identify that, because there's two different interventions here. If it's a fear of water, which means it's not, she would be fearful of, she would do this. Here's the number one question. Does she behave the same way with other people around?
Okay.
Like, will she fear getting her feet wet if a teacher is there and you're not? If the answer to that is yes, then you will want to do systematic desensitization procedure for fear of water, which basically means you would gradually expose her to higher and higher levels of water exposure over the course of months. I did this with my son. He had a fear of water, and it had generalized to a million different things. It was rain, it was bath, it was ocean, it was whatever, you name it. And you essentially will start with just giving exposure to, let's say, a picture of water, and then 1 drop of water, and then 2 drops, and then washing hands, and then bathing and showering. And so it's graduated exposure, systematic desensitization. And at each level, you help the child relax and realize that it's fun and it's cool. With my son, I used to just make jokes about each level, and he'd laugh. And once we were laughing about it, I'd leave it alone for a week, and then I'd go to a higher level. And I think laughing is one of those things that is completely opposite of anxiety. So, those are the things that you do. If it's just happening with you, then you could be pretty sure that it's the reaction that you're getting. In other words, your child is appreciating the attention and motherly love that you're giving by helping your child avoid. So all they're doing is just manipulating, which is always a cute thing that our kids do, and it is also a sign of intelligence.
Yes.
So,
but it's crazy making.
It's crazy making for sure. But what she's doing is just it's form of communication. It's kind of like I can see it happening with my daughter right now. It's sort of like it's just attention seeking. So if that's what it is, then I would just not pay too much attention to it. I would kind of avoid giving the child attention when it's about water, but increase my attention at all other times. So when there is no water involved, I would be giving a lot more attention. And when there is water involved, I would kind of be ignoring her reaction to it, and I would just continue. Now, I know it's difficult because there's a lot of water in your environment. So, if she's having a hard time with bathing with you and you have no choice but to give her a bath, then go ahead and start actually maneuvering her through it. She'll probably react to it, but give her big reinforcers. And as I said, if you can get someone else to help initially while you're desensitizing step by step, that's probably the best way to go.
Okay.
But it's just unclear. The function is unclear because at school she's washing her hands.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to move on to this next question, which I love. Good morning. How can I help my 6-year-old son dress himself? I hand him his shirt and tell him what to do, but he gets confused and the shirt gets put on backwards and doesn't know how to push his legs down in the pants, so I have to do it. It would save so much time if he could dress himself, and thank you for your advice.
Sure. Dressing is usually done best with what's called backward chaining procedure. So each of a couple of things. So first you list all the steps of dressing. So one is, for instance, taking off, undressing, and then there's like putting on pants, putting on shirts, maybe putting on belt, I don't know, putting on socks, putting on shoes, and so on. Each of those is its own activity. So let's talk about pants, which is one of the issues. So you will backward chain this, which means you will put the pants on his legs up to about his hip, and then you will prompt him to do the final step. Just the final step, and then you will reward that, and you'll do that for a few days, and then once that's mastered and he knows by himself to do the final step, then you'll do the last 2 steps. So you'll pull it up to his knees, and then he'll pull it up from there, and then he becomes really good at that. And then 2 or 3 days go by, and then you'll do it from his just putting his feet in, and he pulls it up the rest of the way. So you have to do that, and it's a process. Everything with our kids takes a while. It's not a one-time thing, but that's what you do. Now, that's the individual task of putting on your pants, and you do it the same way with shirt, with socks, everything. You do it backwards, right? So sock, you put it on, and he just pulls it down. Same thing with shoes. You do the whole... So it's all backwards, and he does the last bit, then the last 2 bits, and so on. Then what I would do is I would put a sequence of pictures up for him, so that you have like this is what you do first, and you could even have a sequence of 3 pictures just showing the shirt and just showing the pants. But I think it works better if you try to teach most of the individual pieces, and then you just have shirt, pants, him putting on a picture of him putting on the shirt, him putting on the pants, socks, shoes, and then it gives him a visual cue as to what's next. Then when you're done with that, I would probably add in a timer so that you stay within a certain phase of time, and so he can actually get it done within a certain set time. So those are all the steps. There's a dressing program in Skills. I think I just listed all the SDs,
yes. But here's the thing. The reason why I'm smiling is because I watched our therapist go through all of that with my son, right? And what we were talking about earlier, I watched on the monitor, I heard it, I learned all of that. Then I did the e-learning, learning about chaining, and it expanded my brain so much because in the e-learning they were talking about teaching how to put on a shirt and the different steps involved in putting on a shirt.
Right.
Like laying it out and then scrunching up to the neck with your hands and then putting over the head. Okay, so I was telling a good friend of mine who has a neurotypical daughter who at that time was probably 4, and I said, oh my gosh, I just learned this amazing thing today. And I was going through the example and I was saying, laying it out, scrunching it up, and she said, wait a second, I got to get a pen and a paper. And I said, what do you mean? And she goes, I've been trying to teach my daughter this forever, and that's the step I missed. And so often as parents, there's a step in the task analysis that never would occur to us, and that's why you need Skills, because it's already done for you.
It's so true. The task analysis is probably the very, very important part of this, because we as behaviorists, thanks Shannon, we as behaviorists tend to think in the smallest possible chunk. We're just used to doing that. I'm used to doing that. I do that with my kids all the time, and I don't think of it as large behaviors. It's smallest possible chunk. So the task of putting on one item, it actually does get broken into 20 steps.
And they do it for you. And you don't have to think it through. And I guarantee you, all you have to do is go into Skills and read a couple of those task analyses things, and you'll go, oh, it wouldn't have occurred to me that we have to do this. That never would have occurred to me.
Right.
So I offer that up. And I have the pictures. I came across them the other day that we had of my son putting on his shoes and the pictures of him, buckling his pants. It works, but it's great as parents if we understand why it works. And it works because they individualized all those steps. You don't have to do that for yourself. It's their Skills. Skillsforautism.com.
So the steps are so important. And you wouldn't can't believe how many times you've already done it all the way through yourself. So I know this process takes a while, but it's a teaching process. And if you're patient with it and you just allow, it becomes a successful learning experience for your child, they will actually master it, I guarantee you.
Okay, moving on because we're running out of time.
Sure.
Why does my nonverbal daughter love music so much? It calms, it calms, and she tries so hard to sing along when I play my guitar for her. Favorite toy of all is music. I'm just interested in thanks.
I love that. That's so awesome. Why do we love music? Who knows? It tickles some fancy, everybody loves music and we all love different types of music. Who knows why? But it is calming for a lot of our kids, and I really, really highly recommend that you continue to infuse her life with music in every way that you possibly can. I've always been very fascinated because I see some of our kids learning a lot of language through music, much more so than just through language. So, thank God that she likes it. I'm so glad to hear that, and continue to give it to her. It's very, and of course, there's a lot of theories that say the analytical brain is tied into music. Mm-hmm. And so there's a tendency for people who are very into music to also be good at math. Not every kind of music, some music, but there's a lot of depth to music too.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on. Hi, ladies. My son is 4 with card, 1 year full time. At 3 school districts offered an autism class, OT, and speech. I decided not to send him. A year later, I got the school to reassess. This time, they offered him a neurotypical preschool, 9 to 12, Monday through Friday, no speech, once a month consult with OT. And she says, what the heck? He scored really high on the assessment, but yet I know he still has a lot of deficits. He still needs OT and speech. He can't carry a simple conversation, for crying out loud. What can I say to them in their dumb terms to request for these services? Also, how can they just throw him in a neurotypical class with no support? How do I go about that? And thank you. And she did send an email, so I'm not going to share that, but there we are.
That's terrific, because the email it'll help us connect you with the right people. Your supervisor should be helping write your IEP goals to begin with. You should not be too worried or concerned about this. It is a problem where, first of all, it shows that your child's had significant progress in a year, that the offer is now neurotypical. You're not going to get a lot of conversational type skills taught by a speech therapist. Speech therapists work on speech. What you're talking about is language. Language is a little bit more abstract, and your supervisor should be working on that. If conversation is an issue, it should be in your program. So don't worry too much about not having 2 hours of speech a week, but you should be making sure that it's in your CARD program. If it isn't, there's an issue there. I much prefer neurotypical school. I just think that your child probably needs an aid. Your school may be trying to not give you an aid because it's too expensive and obviously they don't want to. But at this point, I would suggest that you fight in your IEP to try to get them to pay for a card aid so that one of your team members goes to school with your child and spends time helping your child acclimate to regular education and to do conversation and all these other things. So the ideal program for your child sounds like right now, I assume your health insurance is covering most of your home program. The ideal situation would be if your school kicked in now with about 15 hours or whatever it is, 9 hours, the school hours, and allowed our aide to go to school with your child to support. You should know we have contracts with every single school district in California and hundreds of districts outside of California. And this is something very commonly done. In case they tell you that it's not, it was the number one model that we use. So all of our kids, I'm sure you did as well, receive funding from their school districts for us to actually interact with the school.
Yes, they will tell you that they can't and that they won't and that no one has ever had it before, and that is not the truth.
Thousands of kids have. So please do it, because I think that'll be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And don't be afraid of the normal education. Go with that. It's great.
And I will tell you too, if you're looking for a word to fight to get the speech, you can ask them for pragmatic language. That's their word for that social speech. But if you do ask for that, what they will want to do is take your child out of class to do it. And I don't know, I never know whether that's a good idea for our kids. It depends on the kid, but I always feel that isn't a good idea. I fought for a program at my son's school where once a week he had something called a lunch bunch, where a group of kids who were well-behaved kids would get together with him. They would have lunch together with a facilitator. They would play a game. They would give them something to talk about, and that's how he worked on social speech. I think that's something worthwhile to fight for, to say, I want a pragmatic language program in school that works on social language during lunchtime once a week. I think that's ideal. But other than that, they take your child out of class to work on things that your child often would be better off in class. Right. So, we always have to be mindful of what we're asking for and what it's going to mean.
Absolutely. And I have to say that I'm a little bit concerned that you're asking me these questions, because that means your supervisor is not necessarily on top of this. So if that is the case, I get very possessive of my card kids.
We love that.
So if that's the case, you need to, I have your email, but I'd like to know which location you're at so that I can call and ask the senior clinician in that office to get with you. And also, at CARD we have a ton of overlap with senior people anyway. We have a lot of what we call corporate support hours, and those are all senior folks in different departments whose job it is to overlap and see the kids. So I want to make sure that happens as well for you if it hasn't already happened. So, maybe let Shannon know what location you're at, and then perhaps your child's name, and then we will be able to connect you with someone more senior to take care of these issues in your program.
And honestly, the best way to reach out to me to do that, I've got your email here, but if you want to send me more information, send it to me at s.penrod@autism-live.com.